All right, tonight, wolves.
Coyotes.
Coyotes as well. We're fortunate to have Chris Schadler, who's got a master's in conservation biology and a word I'm not even that familiar with, wild canine ecologist. Canid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Wild dogs. Chris this is a program, Becoming Wolf. She is the New Hampshire, Vermont representative of Project Coyote and a member of the Northeast Wolf Coalition. She's taught conservation issues, dendrology, and wolf ecology at UNH. Actually, she's taught at many places, I just found out. Lives in Webster. And while wolf recovery was the focus of her early work, her attention shifted to the eastern coyote when she moved to New England, one of whom ran in front of my car in '93 the other day.
Him, not me.
Right, no,
right.
She did not run. Yeah, they're fast though, just went zipping across and avoid it. I wish you'd come to my backyard and get the squirrels out of there. She chose a farm with a known coyote problem to raise sheep and experiment with non-lethal predator control. Using sound livestock management and common sense, the farm avoided predation for 2 decades. Great. And she provided talks to livestock growers and the public for 30 years on coexisting with coyotes. Divides the time between teaching and working on her book, Becoming Wolf, the Eastern Coyote in New England. She has cards here, there's some literature we passed around, and so I'll turn this over to Chris.
Great, thank you. So thank you for asking me here, and thank you all for being here. Can you hear?
So far.
Okay. Okay, so this is about how I'm going to speak tonight. So is that comfortable?
My best, yeah.
Okay. If I speak too quickly, or if anyone needs for me to repeat or clarify anything, please stop me right then and there while we're talking about it. So tonight's program, Becoming Wolf, is really about the eastern coyote. And the eastern coyote, you might suspect from the title, I believe is becoming wolf. And there are a variety of pieces of evidence that I'm going to use tonight to prove that. It's a remarkable animal, and I am a great fan of it. It's a very interesting critter, I think more interesting than wolves because of its ability to adapt to absolutely anything. So, can any of you tell me what this animal is? The picture, the hint I can give you is that the photograph was taken in Lincoln, New Hampshire in 1994. And what do you think?
Eastern coyote.
You think it's an eastern coyote?
Well, at that time they called them coy dogs.
Mm-hmm. So yes, so this is the animal that we've historically called a coy dog. We've erroneously called a coy dog, right? It does have dog genes. I would say that you're right. This is an eastern coyote, and it looks rather wolf-like. It also looks rather dog-like. I can see some German Shepherd in there. And the woman that took the picture said that when the animal trotted off into the woods, the tail was extremely long, which would indicate coyote, not wolf. But the color of it is very wolfy. So there are creatures roaming around in the woods with us that we are living with that can look like any number of things. And so I'm going to show you a lot of slides tonight of a lot of different coyotes that I've seen. I do represent Project Coyote. It's a national organization. The goal of Project Coyote is to try to make people aware of the ecology and behavior of the animal so that we are smarter about how to live with it. Coexistence really depends upon one side of the equation. On one side of the equation, we have 5,000 coyotes that we're living with in New Hampshire. And on the other side of the equation are all the human beings that live in New Hampshire. And so I'm going to promote the idea that we should coexist with the coyote, but who does the burden fall on for coexistence? The coyote or you and I? Us. It's all about us. It's always all about us. When there are problems with coyotes, whether people have been seeing a coyote in a neighborhood and it's making people uneasy, or the coyote comes up and bites some kid's toy, or bites a child, or kills a person's chickens. You know, if you get misbehaving coyotes, if you look at the situation, the problem can usually be traced back to something that humans have done that was a mistake on our part, or some behavior that we had that we could have amended in some way. So I'll talk about that later tonight, but the burden of coexistence is on us. And of course, ethically speaking, you know, we have to want to coexist with this animal. We have to believe that the right thing to do with wildlife is to live with them, rather than to attempt to control all manner of wildlife, because we can't. I mean, we know we can't anyway. And so, you know, it's really a matter of our perception and sort of turning our thinking around. So in our woods, we have 5,000 coyotes. Our coyotes are part dog, on average about 10% dog DNA, on average about 25% wolf DNA, and the rest coyote DNA. But some coyotes may have no wolf DNA, and some coyotes may have more, of course. So remember that averages hide extremes. At the same time as we have this coy wolf in our midst, we have wolves that are migrating down from Ontario in an attempt to recover historic territory here. Now, the wolves that are migrating down are wolves that look very similar to the coyotes that we have living with us. So in the Northeast, we can hunt these coyotes 365 days a year. You can hunt them at night during their breeding season. There is virtually no season on the coyote. You can kill them whenever you want. There are reasons for that. We can talk about the pros and cons of that approach later on if you'd like. Meanwhile, wolves are protected species. If a wolf appears in the Northeast, it is an endangered species, therefore a protected species. Therefore, people are not allowed to kill a wolf. Yet, the wolves that are coming down from Ontario look very much like our coyotes. So, one of these animals is a coyote, and one of these animals is a wolf. Can you tell which is which?
I'll say the one on the right.
Okay, so are you talking this right? You think that this one is the coyote? Okay. Do you all agree? You could.
I used to go by the pointed ears. The coyote tends to have more pointed ears, is that correct?
Some of them do. So you're thinking that the one on the left is the coyote? Uh-huh. So in fact, I wonder if this is the thing that makes the red dot. Yeah. So this, in fact, is the coyote. So you're doing very well tonight so far.
Just lucky.
So yes, so this is a coyote that was trapped on as part of a litter of 5 on Cape Cod a number of years ago, and was brought to the Stone Zoo just north of Boston. And the man who did the trapping, John Way, studied this group of pups, looked at their behavior. It was all part of his PhD work. But you can see that this particular pack of coyotes, they're very good size, about 42 to 45 pounds, somewhere in there, good size animals. This, on the other hand, is a red wolf, otherwise now known as an eastern wolf. And this wolf is most common in Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario, but is more frequently found now in the southern part of Ontario and also migrating into northern Vermont and New Hampshire. So if a person hunting coyotes made the mistake of killing this animal, they could get 2 years in jail and a $10,000 fine. So it's best to really know your wild canids. And I also think it would be best if we at least had a season on the coyote to give people perhaps more appreciation for it. Was there a question? Somebody have a question? Okay. Our coyote, therefore, is a hybrid. Our coyote is a mutt. Our coyote is different than the western coyote. So you're all familiar with Wile E. Coyote, a little 25 to 30 pound animal that chases Roadrunner, a loser, right? He's really not the wiliest of Wile E. Coyotes. And that little animal is the progenitor of the animal that we are living with out here. But the animal that we are living with out here, even though the western coyote is its ancestor 100 years ago, the animal we have here is much bigger. Instead of being 25 to 30 pounds, it's 30, anywhere from 32, 34 pounds, all the way up to 62 pounds. And some eastern coyotes have been weighed in as large as 74 pounds. To give you an appreciation of this animal is a small wolf as wolves go. So this animal ranges anywhere from 55 to 80 pounds. So you can see that if the red wolf is 55 to 80 pounds, and if our eastern coyote can range all the way up to, say, 70 pounds, it would be easy to make the mistake of killing a wolf when you think you're killing a coyote. There's a lot of genetic information out there. If any of you were hoping for an in-depth discussion on DNA, I'm not going to do that tonight. If any of you want to go to sleep tonight, I can do that. But if any of you would want any more further information on the work that's being done right now in Ontario on eastern coyotes and eastern wolves and their hybridization, please contact me and I'll be glad to put you in touch with the information. These are pictures of animals, of the wild dogs in our neck of the woods, except for this guy, right? These are little western Wile E. Coyotes. This is the ancestor of this animal, right? But with leaving these guys out, all of these animals are interbreeding. Now, the gray wolf, the big gray wolf that's found in northern Ontario and out west, this is the animal that was reintroduced in Yellowstone. Our coyote bears some gray wolf genes. It's very cool that it does. Most of the genes that have come down to our coyote, though, have come from this wolf, the eastern wolf. These are the same wolves. Look how different they are. Look at the variation in the face. Look at the variation in the shape of the ears. Look at the variation in the shape of the muzzle. And yet both of these are eastern wolf / red wolf types. What would be the cause of that variation, do you think? And the same would be true here. Here's an eastern coyote, here's an eastern coyote. Two animals, both eastern coyotes, look very different. Why? Are my questions too hard?
Other animals, breeding?
It's all about hybridization. That's exactly it. So if you were to go, if you wanted a dog that was going to be healthy and a good companion, and you went to the SPCA, would you ask for a purebred dog or would you ask for a mutt? You'd ask for a mutt, because in the long run, mutts with that hybrid background have a broad genetic base and therefore can pull from that genetic base in terms of adaptation and personality traits and all sorts of behavior. So these animals, as you'll see soon, the eastern coyotes that we live with really vary physiologically from one another in dramatic ways. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I came in a little late. Did you say the range of the eastern wolf?
Nope, not yet.
Oh, okay.
Not yet. I'm glad you're excited to know that, though. So, so this, if this picture is alarming to you, don't be afraid. It is, in fact, photoshopped. That might not have been clear, but I want to be really upfront with you. When I first moved to New England back in the mid-'80s, someone had given me a border collie. That may or may not be a nice thing to do to somebody, by the way. And I knew, because the border collie was insane, which is why I got it, that I better get some sheep. So that began a very long career with sheep. And when I moved to New England, I moved to Kensington, a farm in Kensington, New Hampshire, and the farm had had lots and lots of coyote problems. The guy before me had tried to raise sheep, but every time his ewes would drop their lambs, he would allow them to drop them day or night in the pasture. He would leave the afterbirth there. The fences were in terrible condition, and there was no barn. And so really, it was just, he should have put Coyote Diner, Coyotes Eat here, you know, and the coyotes were obliging him. So I wanted that farm for that reason. I wanted to see whether I could educate sheep-killing coyotes to stay off my stuff by thinking like a coyote. And I learned to think like a wolf in the late 1970s when someone handed me a wolf pup out at a wolf sanctuary and said, "This is your animal for the next month. You will live and eat and sleep with this animal, and you will socialize this animal to human beings, so that when it's put back in the pack and veterinarians would come in to care for the wolves, the veterinarians wouldn't be hurt." So that month with that pup really captivated me and started me on a wolf trajectory. But when I came to New England and realized what we had in the woods, my heart has been with the coyote ever since. So, so what I did was my husband and I, we built this little barn. There's the barn, and put a little corral in front and put the dog yard right behind the barn. So if anything came up to the barn at night, these ferocious dogs, would be sure to bark at least, if not aggressively, at least in fear. And then here's a pasture here. There was some pasture through here, a little tiny pasture here. We put 4-foot stock fence up. We didn't do anything else. No electric wire, no trapping, no hunting, nothing lethal. And the first summer that we were there, my ewes gave birth to their lambs and did it in the sanctuary of the barn. And I would let the sheep out by day, and by night they came into the barn every single night. No predation. The coyotes out there were howling up a storm, and I would definitely see them go by, but in the wintertime, I would see their tracks, and they would come right up to the edge of the fence. The other thing that we did was every night we took our dogs for a walk around the perimeter of our property. Genius. What was the idea? Mark territory. Mark territory. What is territory? I'm going to be using that word all night tonight. What is territory?
Their living area.
It is their living area, right? So if it's their living area, what does a territory have in it? Food. Water. They need water. Shelter and den sites. And what that means is that a pack of coyotes never need to leave the territory in order to hunt, in order to breed. Only one pair in the pack breeds, and they stay on territory and breed on territory and go to the same den frequently year after year. And if we know that territory is defended, just the way your dogs, do any of you have dogs? And do your dogs defend your territory? At least by barking? And if not, that you know that they pee all over your property, right? That's a form of territoriality. So my husband and I would take these dogs for a walk around the property, and the dogs would pee and poop around the property. And, you know, just to throw in for good measure, sometimes we would help them along in their effort, because you can never have too much pee. And so all out through here, right? So I was trying to have the coyotes understand in their own language that a pack now had moved into this portion of their territory. About 1/8 of a mile away from our farm, I found a den. This is what a pretty typical den looks like. Some of the animals that we saw near our farm, this is one little guy, kind of a small coyote actually, but an interesting animal. Look at its ears. Now look at its muzzle. Look at the shape of its muzzle. This little guy has a very square muzzle. It's not real long, but it's square. And the squareness of its muzzle is more of a wolf-like trait coming through. Look at its ears. Maybe you'd call that pointy, but I see that being a little rounded, and definitely the color of its coat, very, very gray. But the animal may have weighed, say, 35 to 38 pounds. Now look at this animal. Same pack 3 years later. Same pack. So this is a larger animal. Placement of the ears is different, more pointed. The snout, however, the muzzle is much more narrow, much more typical of coyote. The color on this animal is very red, probably inherited from its red wolf ancestor. Okay, because red wolf is the primary wolf that our eastern coyotes have in their DNA. And then this animal, this is my favorite coyote I've ever met personally in my life. I had great fondness for this animal. Really a big male, maybe 45 to 50 pounds, the breeding male of the pack. This is him again. And for 3 years, we would see this guy in May, depending upon what the winter was like, you know, give or take. In May, he would move on the outside of our pasture, move up toward the power lines, hunt, and then I'm sure he would go back home. We never saw him return, but he would go back and forth frequently over the course of a week, maybe 4 or 5 times. I would see him. And what he was doing, of course, is hunting for his mate while she was nursing pups. And then once the pups were weaned, he was hunting to partially digest food and bring it back to the den and regurgitate it for them. Good guy. So after 3 years, we never saw him again. The average lifespan of an eastern coyote in the wild is about 4 years. If they are kept in captivity, they can live 16. So they are very, very capable of enjoying a long life, but the fact that they are so heavily hunted and trapped, and the fact that there are a lot of diseases out there that knock them off, it really makes life a lot shorter for them. These are 2 mutts here, and this is a coyote that intends to go into the territory of these dogs. But these dogs intend to teach that coyote a lesson. So that coyote may try to move through those dogs' territory again, but maybe not. In the years that we had the sheep farm in Kensington, we had 0 predation. Then I moved to Stratford, had the sheep there, 0 predation. 22 years, zero predation. And, and this was living with coyotes. And this was living with coyotes that had become accustomed to killing sheep. And yet being vigilant and scaring them off. And that's the other thing that I want to tell you. Scaring them off, otherwise known as hazing, was a very important component of my coexistence with these animals. So if there was a coyote that was lurking around outside the pasture fence and didn't seem particularly bothered by me standing there waving my arms, I would hop over the fence, grab a frying pan or have an air horn in my hand and run after that coyote, screaming at it, go, 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 honking the air horn. There are any number of things that you can do to haze a coyote, but one mistake that people make is they run a little bit at the coyote and then they stop, and the coyote moves a little bit away and then turns around and waits for the hammer to fall. And if the hammer doesn't fall, the coyote gets an education, right? That coyote is understanding that, oh, I only have to go a little bit from this wimpy person, right? So when you see a coyote, if it's too near your backyard, if it's too near your stock, if you happen to have livestock, you've got to chase that thing right into the woods. Chase it and don't let it forget how fearsome you are. Be fearsome. Okay. Howling is another form of territoriality. When you hear coyotes, have you heard coyotes howl? So do you feel great when you hear coyotes howl?
I like it.
You do like it? Oh, good. So by the end of this talk, maybe all of you will like it because you'll understand what they're really doing. So this little guy would come in front of my trail cam up north a couple of times a week, and he would just sit in front of the trail cam and just howl his little head off. He's about 4 months old there, and just trying to find the rest of his pack. Okay, now we get to talk about range. So historically, the gray wolf, which is the wolf that was here in New England and occupied all of this area in mustard, about 2 million animals, was reduced to this by about 1968. So from about 2 million animals down to about 450 living in Superior National Forest. The Endangered Species Act was passed right around that time. It was then, endangered species legislation was sort of bulked up a couple of times after that. And the wolf was one of the first species protected under the Endangered Species Act. That Endangered Species Act was a conservation hand that was put out to an animal that is vulnerable to us. It is important to understand that about wolves. We proved in this pogrom against wolves that if we want to get rid of all the wolves, we can do that through hunting and trapping and poisoning. But we can also do that through habitat loss. And habitat loss was the one factor that was most relevant in the decline of the wolf to this state. I'll talk about that later. Once the wolf was protected, the wolf began expanding its range. There are now 4,000 or 5,000 gray wolves living in Minnesota, and gray wolves have moved into Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. They're also beginning to come down into the Lower Peninsula and move out into the Dakotas. With protection, they can do okay. With the reintroduction of the wolf out in Yellowstone here, the population of wolves mushroomed, and it was a very successful reintroduction. Although I am not in favor of reintroducing wolves anywhere, which makes me extremely unpopular with wolf people. But I have very good reasons for thinking so, and if you want to talk about that later, we can. So once wolves were reintroduced into the West, they expanded their population beyond Yellowstone, and today there's been a very bad backlash as a result of that reintroduction. A lot of angry farmers out there that want to kill the wolves, and so that's a little bit of a different talk. So the gray wolf, an animal that is vulnerable to us. The red wolf, another animal that is vulnerable to us. This was their range, southeastern United States out into Texas really, and up into the Northeast. So what I'm saying is that the Northeast, here in New England, we had two different kinds of wolves living here, gray wolves and red wolves. And when Europeans came into the East, massive deforestation occurred. I'll show you that in a cartoon actually. Massive deforestation occurred with loss of habitat. A lot of animals could no longer survive here. So the remnants of the red wolf population moved up into Ontario. What remains of the red wolf, forget this, they're gone, are about 50 animals here in North Carolina. The one aspect of red wolfiness is that this is the wolf most likely to breed with coyotes. Gray wolves can breed with coyotes and have in the past, but typically large gray wolves kill small wolves out in Yellowstone if there's a big enough difference in size. Here in the East, gray wolves in Ontario may be mating with eastern wolves, but red wolves actually seem to like mating with coyotes. So when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service reintroduced red wolves in the late 80s into the Carolinas, the red wolves, when they were searching for a mate, would move out into the territory, and what they would find a mate with was a coyote. And so what has happened now in North Carolina is that those coyotes in North Carolina are now carrying red wolf genes and are becoming coy wolves. So the red wolf is vanishing into hybridization. The red wolf vanishes and gets swamped by coyote genes. So that's sad, but that's adaptation as well. The coyote, on the other hand, this was the original range of the coyote. We didn't have coyotes out here. So the original range was right here, west of the Mississippi. By the time Europeans got out to the west, Europeans altered the environment, killed off most of the bison, inserted sheep and cattle instead out west, much easier prey. And the Europeans also were attempting to wipe out all of the predators. So without competition from competing predators and with a whole bunch of easy prey, the coyote population began to expand. And today, this is the range of the eastern coyote. At this point, folks, you should be saying, whoa.
Whoa.
I think you can do better than that. I mean, this is astonishing. This is astonishing. So when you think about the problems that the gray wolf faced, the gray wolf was nearly wiped out by us and loss of habitat by us, right? And the red wolf wiped out, but the coyote thrived. Now, was the coyote being hunted ceaselessly, endlessly, mercilessly for the last 150 years? Yes. The coyote has been hunted harder than any other carnivore in North America. And in spite of all of that hunting, poisoning, trapping, this is what it's been able to do. How does it do that? It's magical. Not really. You'll understand how it does that. So, loss of habitat. 1620, we had a lot of original forest. By 1850, look at how much has been lost. With the loss of this forest, predators that relied on this forest, cougar, gray wolf, lynx, wolverine, could no longer make a living. So those animals became easier to kill, easier to get rid of. And by 1926, original forest is gone, except for the Pacific Northwest. Now, of course, anybody that knows about forest ecology knows that as soon as you take down one forest, another forest is going to grow up in its place, right? A younger forest, early successional forest. So what we're looking at here is probably 20, 30-year-old early successional forest. And of course, today, our forests have been logged 3, 4, 5 times, some of them. So loss of forested cover. Now, what I'm going to show you is something from the U.S. Geologic Survey that documents the spread of farmland between 1850 and 1950. If land is in farmland, it is not forested. Does that make sense? So follow what's red, because what's red is farmland. Okay, here we go. 1850, 1860, Europeans are moving west. 1900, 1950. Right? Whoa, right? Whoa. Whew. That's pretty impressive. Now watch the human population, white folk population. 1850, 1860, 1900, and 1950. So you can see that there's a correlation between the movement of Europeans east to west and the impact that they had on the land. Okay? So by 1900, according to New Hampshire Fish and Game, all of these animals were essentially missing in the Northeast. So that in New Hampshire, there was one family of beaver left in Colebrook. Can you imagine? No gray wolf, no mountain lion, no lynx. What is this guy?
Badger.
Not badger, Wolverine. We had Wolverine here. And then Fish and Game estimates that maybe by 1900 we had as few as 50 black bear in the entire state. So very different right now, right? So today, as a result of reintroducing the beaver from 2 different areas, actually 3, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Canada, we now have thousands of beaver back. The gray wolf has not returned. The mountain lion is present. By the way, for anybody that came in late, I brought mountain lion scat tonight, just so you could see how huge it is. And so in case you're in the woods and you see something that looks like that, you should be looking over your shoulder.
Where did you find that?
In Rochester. I didn't, one of my students did, in Rochester, yeah. She thought it was an owl pellet, though. That would really be a challenge for an owl. So, so we have, we have mountain lions here, but we don't have a documented breeding population yet. The lynx are trying to make a comeback up north. Wolverine probably will never be back here. We don't have enough contiguous old forest to support them. And black bear, I think we started the season this year with 5,700 black bear. I think that was the tally. So black bear are doing great. So as the woods come back, and we've got, with some pretty healthy forests, these animals came back. All right, so now I want you to remember what you have seen. I want you to remember what the impact that Europeans had as they settled here, removed forest, pushed west, removed forest, converted forest to farmland, and so on, all the way out west. As they converted land from deeply, God bless you, deeply forested habitat to farmland, the animals that were living in that forest could no longer survive. So, as you can imagine, there was a vacuum in the ecosystem, no predators to speak of. And an ecosystem without predators is an ecosystem lacking balance. So this opportunistic little guy, this western coyote, begins to move into this recently disturbed habitat, early forest, farmland, farm animals, lots of rodents. Lots of pasture means lots of rodents, right? perfect for a little wily coyote that relies on rodents and bugs and scavenging stuff, right? So this little intrepid guy begins moving west. I'm going to shift across over here. Imagine coyotes moving in a front from west to east into a lot of disturbed area, okay? The animals that took the southern and central route never got a chance to hybridize with wolves until the Forest Service reintroduced the red wolf into North Carolina. So these animals largely have stayed small western coyotes. This guy, though, these guys that took the northern route by random chance went through Minnesota into the upper peninsula of Michigan, where they think that there were some remnant red wolves here, red wolf types. They may have interbred with red wolves there, because remember, red wolves like to breed with coyotes. And then definitely, as the coyote came into southern Ontario, the coyote definitely bred with the red wolf population in southern Ontario. How did the red wolf population get into southern Ontario? Well, we pushed it basically. We pushed it up there. Southern Ontario was sort of a refuge more than anything else to get away from all of the exploitation of Europeans. So little western wily coyote, 25-pounder, meets up with this handsome red wolf type, interbreeds, and about 100 years later, we've got an animal that looks like that. This is another opportunity for a whoa.
Whoa.
That's very good. They're here. I like enthusiastic whoas.
What's the weight of a red wolf?
So a red wolf weighs anywhere from 55 to 85 pounds.
So German Shepherd size?
German Shepherd size, yes. Longer legs, though, right? Both wolf and coyote have the same life cycle. They only breed January to March. Now, I want every woman in here to appreciate what I'm about to tell you, because this is a stunner. January to March is the only time that there is fertility between the male and female. The rest of the year, there's no viable sperm in the male, and the female does not come into estrus. Sometime for a 5-day stretch of time, the female comes into estrus. That's it for the whole year. Whoa, right? That is a beautiful thing. Now, because the female only has a 5-day period of fertility, what that really means is that most, 2/3 of the female coyote population never has a chance to breed. And they don't. It's kind of cool. That is called population control. Very sort of, that's a concept that's very foreign to the human species, right? We don't know about population control. These guys take population control very seriously. So they mate for life. They are monogamous. Remember monogamy? Monogamy. And all of these behavioral traits, control population. 63 days after mating, she finds a den or digs a den or cleans out a den on her territory, gives birth to a litter of pups, and then we have just completed the period of pup raising. The only time a den is used is to give birth to the pups and to nurse them. Once those pups are nursed, the pack members, the yearlings that are left over from the year before, and mom and dad pick a pup up by the nape of the neck or by a leg or by however they can get the pup in their mouth and trot that pup out of the den and off to a place in territory called a rendezvous site. And it is at that rendezvous site that they reconnoiter for the rest of the year. They hang out. So they don't use the den for shelter. When it's raining, when it's cold, when it's sleeting, they're out there. Their fur coats are good down to about 40 below. So they are well protected by that. Once the pups are out on their own, which is now, the pups are 6 months or 7 months of age, they look pretty big, but they're not full grown yet. They look pretty big, and they are very naive animals. They are naive to us. So it is right now that people are emailing me and reporting to me, I saw a coyote. God bless you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. They will tell me, I saw a coyote in my driveway. It came right up within 10 feet of me and stood there and looked at me. And it was terrifying, crazy experience. Was the animal rabid? Why was the animal out during the day? Is it a sign of sickness that the animal was out during the day? So coyotes are active all the time. They have to hunt all the time in order to feed themselves. And they do not understand what we are until we educate them to understand what we are. So when we see a coyote in our driveway, what do? Scream. We do scream. We walk right at them, and we become as big as we can be. And we say, go, 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 get out of here, loud. And if you have something to throw, you throw. And if you have a hose, you turn it on and spray them. And you chase that animal until you can chase it out of the whole neighborhood, and definitely out of your yard. Educate them. An educated coyote makes a good neighbor. Why? Because 42% of their diet is rodents. Unless, of course, you would rather have the rodents in your house. So I don't know about you, but mice are coming into our house now, chipmunks, squirrels, flying squirrels, everything is sensing, oh God, winter's coming, let's go into Chris's house. And so it's very lively in my attic right now, believe me. I'm really rooting for the coyotes in our neighborhood. The yearlings from the year before are going to leave, many of them, most of them are going to leave the pack at this time because they are capable of breeding, and January's coming up, party time, right? So they've got to disperse away from their natal territory, and they've got to move out into the world and attempt to find a mate. Most of them, of course, two things will happen to them. Most of them will not find a mate, and most of them will die in the process of leaving their native territory. Why do you think most of them die when they leave their territory?
Starvation. Because they don't know how to hunt correctly.
Well, by the time mom lets those pups go at the age of 6 or 7 months, they know how to hunt. So they are capable of hunting. And actually, mom has no say as to when they go. Sometimes pups at the age of 3 or 4 months leave. It's a really bad idea, but sometimes they do. So what was my question?
I thought you said
What's
that
the cause of mortality?
Oh, what is the cause of mortality?
I thought you said that the yearlings were still there, like I assume from the prior year.
They were from the prior year. So if she gives birth in, let's say she gives birth in April or May, say, the pups from the year before, some of those pups are still going to be there. What remains of them? What remains of those pups?
So they're not forced to leave.
Nobody forces them to leave. But here's the thing. The only animals that will breed in that territory are mom and dad. Period. End of story. End of story. So if any other yearlings decide that they have the yen to breed, it's not going to happen for them on territory. Even if a disperser from another pack comes by and brings in brand new genes, wonderful genes, because they're not going to breed with their siblings anyway, right? Mom won't let it. I'll talk about that more in a second. So territories can look pretty crazy. In Algonquin Park, this is what the park looks like with wolf packs having divvied up the territory. Here in New Hampshire, if you can imagine the state of New Hampshire, state of New Hampshire looks like this as well. All of us, all of our homes are within the territory of a pack of coyotes. Just so you know. All of us. So, out in the wild, of course, the coyote territory may also be shared by bobcat, right? So this is an amazing picture that I got from folks over in Vermont. Coyote and bobcat having a little dispute over who's going to eat that deer. So the normal pack structure is mom and dad last year gave birth to a litter of pups, only 3 remain. The mortality rate, extremely high on pups. Half to 3/4 of all pups born will not make it to their first birthday. What kills them? Disease, distemper, mange, parvo, limes, hepatitis, cars, traps, hunting, getting into antifreeze, just getting into any of the things that dogs get into. These guys can get into. So most of the pups are not going to survive anyway until the following year. This year they gave birth to a litter of 4. Here's a disperser wandering through this territory hoping to find a mate. Let's say that these are 3 females and this is a male. These 3 females could be interested in mating with this guy. They would fight each other probably to mate with him, bolstering his ego and making him obnoxious. But mom here will not let anybody else mate on territory. Why is it critically important that she be the only breeder on territory?
For the gene pool?
Maybe for the gene pool. You could assume that these guys have pretty strong genes. You could assume that. But there's, what's that? Population control. Bottom line, if we know that this pack doesn't leave its territory, and I'm going to show you that in a minute, then it's critically important that they be the only ones to breed. So the yearlings get sick and tired of not breeding. They become dispersers, sometimes have to go up to 500 miles to find a mate. And then here we go, January to March. Wolf here, coyotes there. Last year behind my house, I had a mated pair of coyotes doing a courtship dance on an ice pond behind my house. The female was in full-blown estrus. That's blood in her urine. I was so happy to see this. I took about 30 shots of this. And then 63 days later, pups are born. This is the wolf pup that was handed to me in 1979. The guy said, teach this thing to be social with humans. It forever changed how I train my dogs, by the way. So this is a really interesting study going on now down in Rhode Island. Numi Mitchell is the scientist, and she has been working with a trapper. The trapper trapped the breeding male and female of a pack, and they put GPS collars on those animals. And so they were able to track every movement that these animals made. So all of these green spots indicate areas where members of this pack had been found. So you can see where the territory is clearly, and you can also see how mom and dad stay on territory when they are hunting for their pups. This territory has to have everything that they need in their lives. Therefore, territoriality naturally limits the number of coyotes that can be in a certain area. Does that make sense to you? Does everybody get that? So when mom and dad hunt for food for the pups, they come home and the pup nibbles at the mom or dad's mouth or licks the lips, and that stimulates regurgitation. So she throws up half-digested food, and in the process trains him, educates him, as to what his natural prey is. Therefore, in the spring, it was critically important that those coyotes keep off my sheep. Critically important. So I was a vigilante for the first 3 years that we had that farm. And you know, I was a vigilante, and they never took my sheep. The bond between these animals is very strong. And this is a picture that was taken this spring in Waterville Valley. And so here is presumably one of the parents with only 2 pups. Now what I assume looking at this slide is that there are only 2 pups because there's been huge mortality already in this pack. What might have caused the mortality? Really, any number of things. But, you know, so she's going to spend her summer and early fall rearing these 2 pups. By 6 months, which is about right now, pups are out and on their own. And by the time they're 1 to 2 years of age, they're sexually mature. They can become sexually mature at an earlier age if they are heavily hunted. So where heavy hunting occurs, that heavy hunting has a destabilizing effect on the pack. And I'm going to demonstrate this to you in a little bit, how that all works. What do coyotes eat? I know you want to know this. So all of these things have been pulled from coyote scat. You can see that they have a very broad diet, very healthy. Bunnies, 30% of the coyote diet in the spring is fawn. What I did not just say is that coyotes take 30% of the fawn. I did not say that. I said fawn make up 30% of the coyote's diet, and some of those fawn are roadkill. Bugs and weasels and woodchuck, and if you have horses, the coyote becomes your best friend, right? Because woodchuck are a fearsome thing for people that have horses. Do any of you have livestock or? Yeah, not horses. Oh, sheep. Oh, and coyotes can fish, and sometimes eat catfish. Thank you for laughing. It's a kind of a corny joke. Let's see. Aluminum foil. I've pulled aluminum foil out of coyote scat. 42% of their diet is rodents. So, and amphibians, house cats. Coyotes normally can't get house cats because people that let their house cats out generally keep the claws on the animal, and that allows the cat to climb up trees. And coyotes can't climb up trees except for one kind of tree, which I'm going to show you in a minute. Right? The biggest problem for house cats are great horned owls and fisher. Frogs, sneakers. I've pulled out some ked and banana peel, and again, rodents, lots and lots of rodents. Notice that humans are not part of their diet. We are not on their menu. Yay, right? They can climb apple trees. So this is not, these shots are not photoshopped. A kind person that was attending one of my talks sent me these pictures, and absolutely great. Let me show you this. He said that the deer had come in and browsed as high up in the tree as they could, standing on their hind legs. And after the deer got finished browsing, the coyotes came in. So they wander around in apple trees, eating these, spongy, gross apples, and you'll see it in their scat. So this is January in the Midwest somewhere. Perfectly normal. People see coyotes in trees, and they call the Navy SEALs. And they are absolutely convinced that all the coyotes in the area are rabid and acting irrationally. The one that acts irrationally is the human here. So the coyote is our native dog, most persecuted carnivore in the US. We kill a lot every year. And in most states, you can kill coyotes all year long using all these methods. But here in the Northeast, we do not blow up dens. We don't do this. We don't hunt coyotes from airplanes. And we don't poison wildlife. At least it's illegal to poison wildlife. But out west, the federal government hires people to do this with taxpayer dollars. It's a terrible thing. And this guy, he's got some kind of submachine gun or something, and he's trying to wallpaper his barn with coyote pelts. And I'm sure he feels that he has saved a lot of deer in all of this killing. But what we know for certain about coyotes is that the heavier they're hunted, the faster they reproduce. And 25 years ago, when I first said that, because I had learned that out west, because they have known this for a long time out there, people scoffed at me. They called me a liar. They said it couldn't be true. It makes no sense. Well, yes, it does. And you're going to understand how this happens. So, coyotes have a way of controlling their population through monogamy and through territoriality. Those two things work to naturally control their population, as well as the female's very short estrus cycle. When a pack is heavily hunted, the structure gets destabilized. Now, who did I say in the pack is in charge of population regulation? Mom, right? Mom. All the dirty work always falls on us, right? So we're going to pretend right now that we are a pack of coyotes and that this room is our territory. Now, a standard pack of coyotes has 5 to 7 animals in it at the height of their pack density. By the end of the year, much fewer remain. So anyway, we're just pretending here. So we're going to pretend we're a pack. Now we're going to pretend that there's a crazy person out there who hates coyotes and is going to come in and kill as many as possible. And so let's take, let me just see here. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is have the crazy person take all of you guys. So I'm sorry, we'll miss you. And notice that I'm stepping over here with these guys, okay? So do I have a mated pair here? Is there a mated pair on this side? Notice I didn't say breeding pair. I just said mated. Anybody married here? Great, you're married? Wonderful, or at least you're a pair. Right, all right, so so this is mom and dad, all right? So we're gonna pretend that this is mom. So all of these guys are no longer here. First of all, how are all of us going to benefit from them no longer being here?
More space, more food.
More food,
More space.
right. We get the opportunity to eat the food that these guys would have eaten on territory, right? So yay for us. So our nutrition increases. What do we know about what happens to female mammals as our nutrition increases?
More fertile.
We are more fertile. Oofda. As females increase their nutrition, the females in the pack, they are more likely to create more eggs. Mom, here, you're going to be cruising the next time you guys breed, but I'm not going to ask you any questions about that. So with increased nutrition, instead of having 4 or 5 pups, you might have 6 or 7 or 8. And that frequently happens out west. They're seeing litters out there of 10 and 12 pups, really with this increase. Okay, so the rest of us, however, we're not going to breed. We're not going to breed. We're just going to benefit from them being gone. All right, now, let's imagine that another crazy person comes by and kills, let's say, oh, Mom, we're going to knock you off. okay? So mom gets taken along with a couple of other of you. I'm not going to single you out. Without mom here, without mom, what do you think the response of the females is going to be? Party. You should see her back there. She's already begun, right? Without mom to restrict breeding, if we have, is your name Jim?
Stu.
What is it?
Stu.
Oh, Stu, I'm sorry. So I'm going to make you the disperser, okay? So Stu, the disperser, comes in from, like he's been traveling 100 miles to try to find a female that will give him the time of day. So here you are, this is like Mecca for you, okay? And so what we have here is a situation where the structure of the pack has become destabilized. Mom, the enforcer, is no longer around. Dad, in order to be able to carry on life as a male, you're not going to breed with any females here because they're your children, so you take off and you go look for a new mate with whom you will be monogamous, by the way. Okay? Fond memories of her, but you're going to be monogamous to the next one. So with no mom and no dad here, there's no law and order. And so a disperser, handsome disperser, comes in, nobody can deny him, and you may end up breeding, in fact, all of these females here.
So I
in
don't
this.
have to be monogamous.
Well, part of the anarchy that ensues from the pack structure becoming destabilized is that many females on territory can breed. So all of those restrictions sort of get thrown out the window. Now, imagine that 3 or 4 females breed on territory. And these females have had the enjoyment of better nutrition. So you're going to create larger litters probably, healthier litters. But there's only one of him to help you raise those pups. So what do you think's going to happen?
Some starvation.
There's going to be some starvation. What they have found out west is erratic behavior on the part of the pack members. So that instead of hunting natural prey, the pack members hunt, they are more likely to take people's dogs, cats if they can catch them, sheep. They become livestock killers. So it's situations like that where the normal restrictions have been removed, and then anarchy ensues. So, just want to address coy dogness for a minute. Here is a western coyote in a field in Indiana, and here is some guy's black lab. And this guy took a picture, 12 pictures of his dog mating with this coyote. She's in full heat. The dog mates her because they're both members of the same family. Even though they're different species, they can still produce pups. I didn't say fertile offspring, but pups. So he mates her. Now he's not a coyote, so he's not ethical. By his very nature, he's a cur. He's a dog, right? So he's going to go home to his kibble and bits and say, what a great day, right? But if he had been a self-respecting coyote, he would have mated with her for life, right? But he's not. So off he goes home. 63 days later, she is digging a den and giving birth to a litter of coy dogs. Now she's all by herself. What are the chances that all by herself she can rear that litter?
They'll all die.
They usually do die of either starvation or exposure because she has to leave the den in order to feed herself. And it's usually late March, early April. I mean, the weather's not good, you know?
She doesn't have the male to help with the feeding or the young, too.
Exactly. So the chances of those coy dog pups being around are very slight. But let's say, for argument's sake, that she manages to rear one of them. Now she's traveling with a coy dog, which has twice the likelihood of affiliating with people, friendly with people, so that's not going to go over well with people. And it's got only half the ability that it needs to hunt well. So it's a walking liability. Chances for that coy dog pup really making it in the world are really slim, but here is the kicker. The following January, she is going to go off and look for a mate. Hopefully, she uses better judgment, right? So she's off looking for another mate. That coy dog pup won't become fertile or won't become sexual until the following year. But instead of becoming sexual January to March, coy dogs become fertile earlier in the October, November. And the only animal they can possibly breed with then are dogs. So in order to have a coy dog population that reproduces itself consistently as coy dogs, right, would be impossible. And so this is a coy dog. This is a part Siberian Husky, part coyote, Western coyote. Total psychotic animal, crazy dog. They're, cute, but crazy. So we don't have coy dogs in the woods, is what I'm saying. And then finally, I'm almost at the end of this. How are you guys doing? You okay? Much as I did not like the fact that they reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone, I had an opportunity a year after the reintroduction to go out there and participate in something called the winter count. And in the winter count, I spent a week out there with another person following these wolves around and hoping to see what it was they were killing and what the health of those animals were. So in this instance, we never saw the kill. We came upon these animals. They were about a quarter of a mile away, and we're on a butte over here looking over, and somebody came along with a great powerful camera. And so I show this to show you that even among a pack of animals, in this case wolves, that live depending upon one another, that there is still tremendous competition between one another. This is the breeding female, and this is her mate. She has her territory on the kill, as does he. Look at their eyes. They looked at each other consistently the whole time, and they were growling the whole time as well, because they were being territorial on their part of the kill, which we thought was pretty interesting. These animals were fighting over who was going to eat next, and this animal completely intimidated this guy. In fact, we never saw this animal eat. So you can see by his ears that are back and flattened, very submissive. He licked his lips a lot. And after they had finished eating, they moved away about 100 feet. They laid down in the snow. They slept for half an hour or so. And then she woke up first, and she did one of those long, dog stretches and shook the sleep out of her body. And then, nobody in here is going to like this, but I'm going to howl. Here we go. I don't know how this is going to sound. Hear it. So imagine that you're me. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Yellowstone, the sky's turning red. You've just watched this. You've just watched them sleep. Now she's going to wake them up. She goes, sort of like that. And they all wake up and they come around her and they lick the blood off of her face and neck, and they hip slam into her because that's the way wolves say hi. And then all of her family they can't wait to say hi to mom because they haven't seen her in like half an hour, and then they all begin to howl. And as they howl, their big wolf tails are wagging back and forth. while they're howling, they're going up and they're slamming into her, sometimes into dad, and they're moving around a lot between and amongst one another, and it is joyful. It is a happy moment in their life. Certainly in those first 10 years out in Yellowstone, life was good for these wolves. They were well-fed animals, and they still are well-fed, those ones that are in Yellowstone. I bring this up because when people hear coyotes howl, they assume that the animals are getting ready to hunt, because that's sort of the archetype that we have of the howling monster in the woods getting ready to hunt down some bunny, you know. So when coyotes are howling, sometimes you'll hear one animal howl, and then you'll get a response from either a singleton or a few of them. So this guy says, "Where are you guys?" And they answer, "We're over here." And this guy might say again, "Not sure exactly where that was, over here, here near the wetland." And then boom, it's like somebody pulls the cord. Or sometimes you'll hear an entire pack howl, and then you'll get a response from another whole entire pack. Has anybody had that happen? I mean, it's a very cool thing. And so what that is a territorial display. Pack A is saying, listen to how ferocious we are, how big we are, how many of us there are. And because coyotes have the ability to make so many different sounds, barking, yipping, yiping, squeaking, ululations, they can throw their voices, they can do all sorts of things. 5 animals can easily sound like 10. So pack A is howling away here, answered by pack B, who is trying to sound at least as impressive. And it's all about territory. It's all about convincing each other not to even try to come into their defended area. So it's not about hunting. When carnivores hunt, they're really quiet. Because if you made your living with your feet and your jaws, you're not going to go into the woods tearing off, yelling at the top of your lungs, right? That would not be a wily thing to do. So when the woods are quiet is when predators are out there hunting, which, you know, sometimes is creepy to me. Sometimes it's thrilling to me to know that there's all this balancing act going on out there. And it's so quiet, and you would never know that any of it's happening. And yet, you know, predator and prey are acting like chisels, evolutionary chisels with one another. The coyote keeping the deer fleet, and the deer keeping the coyote wary and fast. So through time, since 1944, since the first time coyotes were trapped here, coyotes have become larger. They are on an upward trajectory size-wise. They are becoming larger in order to take advantage of the prey base we have here, which still, for most coyotes, for the most part, is rodents. But deer represent a concentrated packet of food. And when they can take deer, and it's not often that they can, when they can take deer, they do. And when they do, they operate as a pack, just like wolves take prey. How amazing is it that in 100-year time, since coyotes began moving from the west and coming east, not only has this animal become so wolf-like in looks, but become so wolf-like in behavior. Western coyotes are not pack animals. Eastern coyotes are pack animals. Western coyotes, if they eat any deer, it's deer that they scavenge as roadkill because they're too small to take deer. But the coyotes that we have here can take deer. For example, at the end of the winter last year, remember how deep the snow got? And at the very end of the winter, there was a crust of ice on the snow that forced the deer to post hole, making them very vulnerable, but the crust of ice was thick enough that it would support the coyotes. So coyotes were taking deer at the end of last winter, but believe me, all last winter from January on, The coyotes had a horrible time finding food. And there was also lots of mange among the coyotes out where I live in Webster. They had a terrible winter. So we've got the eastern coyote because of the actions of our European ancestors, clearing the land, killing off predators. The coyote comes in, takes advantage of the vacuum, flourishes, and ironically brings back the DNA of the wolf that our ancestors tried so hard to remove. But now that DNA of the wolf is in a form of it's in the form of the coyote, which we cannot remove. Wolves, remember, are vulnerable to us. Coyotes, the harder you hunt them, the faster they reproduce. Responsive reproduction. So what's the antidote if we want fewer coyotes? Leave them alone. And to the uninitiated, that makes no sense, right? But you ask people from Colorado, Arizona, Idaho, you ask wildlife biologists, and they will tell you, yes, a stable coyote pack doesn't have large litters, and the population remains stable. Our problem is that we can't seem to leave them alone. So that's the end of the talk. But shameless advertising, if any of you want to go on a trip up to Algonquin Park with me in February, which is a very cool trip. It's 6 days. We get to stay in the research center in the middle of Algonquin Park, which has heat and light simultaneously, right? And we stay with 5 of us stay in that, and then there are cabins where 2 people and 2 people and 2 people and 2 people stay, and we have dinner and breakfast and lunch in this cozy place, and it's really great. And we get to pee in that, and it's really cozy and great. And this is our local pest. These are pine martens. So an animal that is rare here is the pest up there, and it is such a joy to see these guys right outside our window. The birding is great, and the world expert on gray jays is right at the park, and he gives us an amazing talk. And we get to track everything. It's a complete ecosystem. And on this day, somebody's picked up fresh wolf tracks, and so off we went, and we tracked 3 wolves. We tracked 3 wolves for a couple of miles. And normally we don't see wolves, but in 2009, we were able to watch a pack of wolves eating off this moose carcass and having interactions with raven and fisher. Coyote came in, that was something. And then somebody from another pack tried to sneak in and grab a bite, and the alpha female went nuts and chased her and chased her and chased her around this wetland, chased her into the woods. Oh my gosh, it was an amazing thing. But normally we don't actually see wolves, but we see wolf tracks right around the camp. We are there with them, and it's a safe, wonderful way to be in a really wild place and do some really cool stuff. We go out at night and howl and frequently get responses. That's just spine-tingling, you know? And yet on the eastern edge of Algonquin Park are these eastern coyotes. And so when these wolves, which are a red wolf type, eastern wolves, red wolf type, when they leave the park on the east, on the western side, sorry, they frequently breed with eastern coyotes. So there's a lot of fun to be had. So not that we get to watch them breed, but anyway, if anybody is interested in that trip, take my card and contact me. I've got 3 spaces available at this point. So, okay, so I'm really done now. So I'm done. Thank you for staying awake and being here.
I guess in my role as disperser, I have to let you know that I'm sure you may have some comments and questions to Chris. You want to talk to her at various times. We also have refreshments out there. Thank you all for being here, and this has been fun.
Thank you.
Fun.
Thank you. Yes.
I have a question. I live in Goffstown, and I have sheep, okay? And last year, we've had sheep for about 9 years, and I have electronetting.
Yep.
We do not know how, because the voltage, we always test it, like always test it. But our neighbor came up to us and said, do you know you have a coyote in the field with your sheep? And of course that panicked me, and I went out, and there was this coyote zooming back and forth, zoom, 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 zoom,
Inside?
inside the electromagnetic, and it could not get out.
Oh.
And we couldn't get it out. And I panicked over the whole thing being in there.
What were the sheep doing?
They went under the barn, and I have a chain link pin for them, so I locked them up.
Well, wait, I'm confused. So if they were
Coyote was
in,
there, but it didn't attack the sheep. And it was running like it was crazy, just zooming.
it was probably completely freaked out.
And we didn't know how to get it out, and we couldn't get it out. And our next hunter,
Oh,
and we had it shot.
oh,
But it was also full of mange that kept on giving, because one of our dogs didn't touch the body or anything. We had it buried the next day. We didn't let the animals out. But one of our dogs got the mange all over its face, and that turned into a big ordeal, and the vet had seen this mange that's on coyotes before.
Well, mange is mange, and coyotes get mange. 2 of my dogs came down with mange this summer because we're in the woods all the time, and there's mange out there. Yep. So what I would have done, first of all, coyotes can easily jump over electronetting.
Okay.
So that's really not protection. It keeps sheep in, but it certainly doesn't keep any predators out. I would have just unplugged the electronetting and opened it up, and then gone around the backside of the electronetting and literally herded the coyote out.
Okay, now, the whole thing completely freaked me out, because I started to feel like there's hundreds of them waiting to pounce on my sheep
Oh,
out in the wood, and so the whole episode, it left us real confused about what to do, how to have the sheep. And you said you have sheep. Or you
I
have
did.
sheep.
2 years ago, I sold them all. Yay! 22 years, and now I'm sheepless.
What kind of fencing did you use?
4-foot stock fence.
4-foot stock fence.
4-foot stock fence, no electric wire, no nothing. The electronetting, to me, is just, it's not protective. It just holds sheep in place.
Okay.
It's interesting that the coyote didn't go after the sheep, right?
Well, I
I
think
mean-
it was a really young animal. When I looked at it, it was very small.
What
really.
time of the year was it?
It was actually the very end of July.
Oh, okay, so it might have been that year's pup,
Okay.
one of the pups. So, yep, so you weren't here in the sheep part of it. You guys came in a little bit late.
Right.
Yeah, so we can talk afterwards about all the things that I did,
Okay.
because I became a vigilante to keep my sheep safe
Okay.
and retrain the coyotes in the neighborhood. Yeah,
I have a almost 6-month-old German Shepherd pup, female, not yet spayed, soon to be at some point. But if she goes into estrus, I'm out in the woods all the time. I ran into a coyote just last night. I live pretty close. And do I have to worry about if my pet sitter comes and lets out my pup to play with the pup, and the pup is unbeknownst to me and estrus? Do I have to worry about that?
well,
There's coyotes like,
remember that male
Wandering around.
coyotes can only breed January to March.
my female.
Well, I know, but it takes 2 to tango.
Right, but the males can,
Male coyotes can only breed January to March.
I missed that.
So as long as your dog doesn't come in estrus during that time, then the only thing you have to worry about is every other dog in the world.
Right. I know that. This isn't about the dog, I just worry about if the pet sitter comes, and she's vigilant about other dogs too. And
Oh,
I'm
she,
trying to-
if the dog is in estrus, she needs to be on a leash.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Another thing, do I have to worry about, as a pup, a pack of coyotes baiting the dog away?
You know, people have this idea that coyotes do that.
Yeah, I know, someone told me, and
I know there's so much misinformation out
Yeah,
there.
Sure,
I have never heard of a documented case of that happening.
okay, good, because several years ago, I was out in St. Paul's, and there was a pretty large pack of cow out there, and there was a pup, or it looked like a year-old, and they had just mowed the field. And
Oh,
he was having a field day, just gobbling, I watched it gobble down mice. And
right.
pounce and throw them up in the air and pop them right down. And my shepherd chased it to the edge of the wood. And then the coyote went away, and then my dog turned around and came back, and the coyote came right back out. And I watched it for 45 minutes holding on to my dog, just snacking.
That's
And I-
neat.
And yeah, it was very cool.
You're lucky to have seen that.
Yeah, and so I was just wondering, somebody had said something to the effect where they pull it into the woods.
No, they don't. I mean, so their survival depends upon their ability to hunt. And what we know about coyotes is that they are only successful once out of every 13 hunting attempts.
Yeah.
So they're hungry animals, but they don't eat fellow dogs. Will they take a small dog if that small dog is there? Yeah, they'll take a small dog.
Would they take a pup? Like I've got a 5.5-month-old.
I think
She's-
too big.
She is too big.
Okay. all right.
Yeah, yeah. And
Kind
in,
of brainless, anything that moves, she's running all that.
well, in most of the encounters between dogs and coyotes, the dogs are chasing the coyotes,
Yeah.
and the coyotes are running away as fast as possible. So,
What's the psychology in California with those coyotes where I've seen it on the news, on videos, where they're almost like preying on
Mhm.
people and
Yep.
in the suburbs and on pets,
Yep.
even on leashes. What makes their psychology different than the Eastern?
well, again, and I made this point in the beginning of the talk that the biggest, if there's behavior issues with coyotes, it's usually our misbehavior that's the cause of them acting strangely. And so for coyotes to come into people's backyards and eat our stuff, that is strange behavior because their natural instinct is to stay away from us. And so when they're not staying away from us, it is because we are doing something to attract them. And so Project Coyote is most active in California and is trying to educate people to keep their garbage in a can, not to attract coyotes or mountain lions. Never feed your dog in the backyard. So many people do that and leave kibble around. That will attract them in. Many people like to feed wildlife. And the only fatality that we know of ever happening between a coyote and a human happened in Nova Scotia about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
The girl was attacked on the path.
Attacked and killed. 3 coyotes killed her. And we could not believe it. So the authorities went in, killed every coyote they could find, tested them all, found the ones that were responsible for the deed. Then about a year later, somebody went in, a researcher went in and interviewed everybody on the outside of the park and found 3 families that said, oh yeah, we've been feeding them for years. They'll come right up and eat right out of our hands. So, you get a habituated coyote, you've got a problem. The other problem in California that is very different out here is sprawl. The fact that California's human population is growing so fast that it's expanding into all of the territory that used to be enjoyed by mountain lions and coyotes and other critters. And so there's more confrontations between humans and wildlife. And most people don't know how to handle those confrontations. So it's usually human misbehavior. Did you have a question?
Well, you were talking about, and other people talk about packs of coyotes, and it would seem to me if you know, in the summertime, a female might have some 3 or 4 or 5 pups. But in the wintertime, usually, from what you've told us, during the breeding season, I almost never see more than 2 together, 2
Right.
tracks.
Right.
I don't see a coyote, so I did see 4 one time together, the live animals, but I always see either 1 or 2 tracks. I never see a pack, and yet, and I know they make 2 can sound like 5, but I never see more than 2 tracks. And I'm out in the woods a lot,
Yeah.
looking at tracks.
That's neat. So, yeah, I agree. January to March, you're likely to see pairs of
And then
coyotes.
breeding, maybe.
Yeah, breeding pairs. But then you should also be seeing singletons out there as well. I mean, the tracks,
I do.
single tracks, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, even, you know, most of the year coyotes hunt singly. Even a breeding pair for the remainder of the year will hunt alone, unless it's the end of the winter and deer become available.
Yeah, the deer yards and stuff.
That's right.
I was gonna ask you something else. Oh, well, when you, typically in the summer, say in July, when you hear yippee yip yip, you know, it sounds like 10.
Yeah.
How many would there probably be?
Well,
In most cases,
so
in New Hampshire.
so let's say she's given birth to a litter of 5 pups, which is average standard. So it's mom, dad, plus 5. That's 7 right there.
Okay.
And if there are any yearlings left over, you know, you could have 10 individuals in June or July if nothing has happened to any of them yet.
Too
but-
bad you can't see the tracks in June and
I
July.
know,
In
I
the
know.
wintertime, there's no more than 2.
I know,
More
I
than
know.
2.
You're absolutely right. I gave a talk. I gave some talks up in Campton at the campground this past summer, and the night that I came home, I found 3 dead coyote pups right along the side of the road. All of them must have been traveling together, you know, not knowing anything about cars, and somebody ran them all over. It was just heartbreaking to see that, but that's what happens.
Okay. Oh,
Oh, there's a,
I was wondering if you could speak to about, I came in kind of late, so I apologize for that. But, do you know about the hybrid wolves that have been up in Alexandria, and a couple got loose not too long ago?
yeah,
Do you know about the hybrids that, I know they were being rescued.
yeah,
They were being brought to New Hampshire.
yeah,
But what confuses me is that, okay, these are hybrids and these are people who are raising them or doing something.
right.
Do you know anything about?
Oh, I know a lot about that. So I won't say a lot about it, but you and I can talk about it later. It is legal to buy wolf pups. You can do this on the internet. Go Google wolf pups for sale, and you will not believe how many people have wolf pups for sale. You can only buy a wolf pup if it is 98% wolf and 2% dog. So it needs to be a hybrid, okay? Now I've seen these hybrids, and they're not hybrids. They're as wolfy as anything I've ever seen in my life. And no one's checking, right? So somebody says, yeah, this is a hybrid. It's only 2% dog. Well, how exactly are you going to orchestrate a breeding, really, where you've got only 2% dog in the breeding? And none of it makes any sense. But there's pressure from groups to be able to purchase wolf pups. And then, of course, people get those pups. They become way too much for most people to handle, rip your house apart, eat other people's dogs. And the kind of wolves people get are gray wolves, by the way. They don't get the small red wolf that we've got in Ontario. They want the big gray wolf, right? The timber wolf. And then rescue groups, like the guy up in near Conway, and there's another guy over in Maine that has taken 30 or so rescue wolves You know, people just don't know what to do with them. Frequently, people think it's okay to release them into nature because, after all, you know, it's a wolf. And it's just, obviously, it's a terrible idea because those animals have been captive and they don't know how to hunt very well, and they habituate to people and they become pests to people and kill livestock and on and on and on. So it's unfortunate.
Very well, thank you very much.
Okay?
Some of you may have other questions.
Yeah, I'll be here.